The Jaguars 53 man is out, and Arik Armstead might not be the best Jaguar, but he has become the most important. I'll tell you why here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I 100% agree that it is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. Appreciate you joining us. Remember, we can be found on every single platform, whether it's YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you check in and tap in every day to ensure that you do not miss an episode of the show. Download the Gametime app and create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. That's right. It's time for me to also say what's up to the everydayers. We appreciate you joining us. Now, let's get right to it. We're going to land the show today talking about questions that got answered. All off season, we had all of these questions. They made their free agency signings, and then we tried to dissect what those things mean. We weren't going to know what it meant until they made cuts. Now, I'm going to tell you exactly what I believe it means and questions that got answered about what they feel about the roster and where they feel they're strong at. And it's all going to be based on what they did over the last 24 hours. But first, we're going to start, and I'm going to tell you why Arik Armstead is so important to this team. One, because they went out and they signed him to come in here and be a free agent. And the GM, the head coach, none of those people were here when Calais Campbell was here. So I won't say they went and tried to basically bring in another Calais Campbell. But technically, they went out and tried to bring in another Calais Campbell, not because they know what it's like to have him before, because that's not the case. But they knew what this team needed. The team needed to be more stout on defense. They needed more leadership on defense. The team actually in the front seven needed another guy in the middle with the way that they're going to play. I thought I was in the middle, and then they listed him as a defensive end, and we had talked here and spoke here on Locked On Jaguars about the fact that the reason why they didn't have a lot of edge depth is because they believe Arik Armstead can play the big end position. And that's why I think he's so important, because without him, they go back, in my opinion, scheme aside, they go back to being exactly what they were a year ago, and that's a team that has a two-headed monster when you need at least 3 or 4 people down there to play. I do believe that Arik Armstead is going to help them in both the run and the pass with his experience, with his ability to clog things up. And then, more importantly, he's going to help the team when things get tough. When things get tough, there's a leadership from a player who came from a good program and who's been ultra productive. And if you want to find out what NFL players listen to, it's credibility. They listen to guys that put the work in, that have a proven track record, a large body of work, and it's about trust. It's also about trust, in my opinion, from defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen. So with all of those signings in free agency, and everybody was talking about Mitch Morse needing a center and need more wide receivers. And what about corners? Because before free agency, there was only one corner on the roster who was under contract in after 2024. It appears to me that even if it's by default and even if it's by design, that Arik Armstead has just become maybe the most important player on the team, if he's healthy. And that's a big if. Folks are now saying, where they're listening at defensive end, is he going to start? Because they got Trayvon Walker and they got Joshua Allen. Right? Joshua Hines Allen. I think he starts at the 3 technique, but he's listed as a defensive end because he's going to spend a lot of time out there. Just think about those 3 guys rotating. Now, if we go back, we'll remember and we'll recall where this team in 2017 with Jacksonville, they had Yannick Ngakoue, Dante Fowler, and then those are 2 of the ends, and then they had Calais Campbell. They had a 3-headed monster at end. And all 3 of those guys got, I think Dante had 9.5, and then he got 2 in the playoffs. All 3 of those guys had double-digit sacks that year. In fact, Calais had 14. I think Yannick may have had 10. So that team didn't use more than a 3-man rotation at end. They just didn't. Sometimes Calais Campbell, who started at end, would actually go into 3 technique on passing downs and line up, or maybe it's a 3 technique, but he would line up next to Malik Jackson on passing downs, and they took Marcel Darius out. Then other times, when he wasn't starting at the big end position, you would have a situation where he could be on the bench when Dante Fowler and Yannick Ngakoue were in the game. There was just a really, really nice rotation. So if you think back to that team, they really played 5 guys the majority of the time, with Darius, with Malik Jackson. Ironically, he also had some experience at 5 technique, but he only played defensive tackle here. Calais Campbell, Yannick Ngakoue, and Dante Fowler. You can pull it off. You can definitely get away with that. But imagine that team if they lost Calais Campbell. Who was the next player up? I off the top of my head, I can't recall if they had another player who really, really had a tremendous impact on that team. I just don't remember somebody else. And that's the thing. We could look at rosters all day, but there are certain things that you should remember off the top of your dome if they're super, super important. So I said that to say this. For those that are really, really overly concerned about depth at the edge spot, that is only going to factor in if one of those dudes gets hurt, because what happens is then you worry about drop off and what you lose when the rotation starts. Good thing for the Jaguars, they kept some people yesterday. The CZ Ultimawio is someone that the Jaguars kept. I hope I said his name correctly. I do not want that dude after me because he's 6'5", 282 pounds. I can deal with that part of it. I just can't deal with the fact that he's 25 years old. I got 30 years on him, man, and that fighting sometimes that's where your age doesn't really help you. But on a serious note, I do believe the Jaguars with this rotation are going to play about 8 linemen every single game, and they're really going to rotate guys in and out. And you've seen a lot of that in the preseason. But everybody's not equal. Any team that loses one of its 3 best pass rushers or 3 best defensive linemen, it's going to take a little bit when you dig deep down. It's going to take just a little bit more effort from everyone else to make up for that loss. So we don't really try to speak injuries and stuff into existence. We just don't do it. It's bad mojo. But that I did that just to let you guys know that I do understand the concern if you're talking about rotating. The one thing I am not concerned when it comes to rotating is the fact that they're going to play so many people kind of sometimes eliminates the chances of something like that happening, right? Of the disaster really happening to any of these players. But Arik Armstead, from a performance standpoint, let's just assume that everybody's healthy. From a performance standpoint, is going to be absolutely critical for this team. Why did I wait till the day to discuss this? Well, because I thought when they brought in Trevis Gibson, I thought when they brought in Trevis Gibson with his experience, not only in the league, but with the defensive line coach, I really, really thought that there was a chance that was going to be a dude that was going to give you 15 to 20 snaps a game and really, really help keep everybody fresh. So I think when they let him go and they let DJ Coleman go, folks were just looking around wondering like, okay, what are they going to do? I'm glad you asked. I think they're going to be a real 3-man rotation amongst the defensive ends. We talked yesterday briefly that a rookie can play a big role. That rookie is Mason Smith. I'm going to discuss that a little bit further, and then we'll look at the rest of the 53 in segment 2, and we'll talk about some of the questions that got answered by this team. We'll get to all of that stuff halfway through segment 2, and then we'll close the show out, obviously, talking about that as well. We'll do all of that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by Gametime. That's right. Let me tell you something, man. There's a lot of college football that's about to be played, right? All over the place. Somebody was talking about tickets to the Florida-Miami game. There are super deals at Gametime. All you got to do is download the Gametime app, right? I'm telling you right now, man, they're curated deals. It makes it easier to find the best price on great seats. The super deal, seat views before you buy, lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, all of that stuff. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all of that stuff, and all in pricing. Listen, I'm telling you, if you toggle that feature, it shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. I referred somebody to Gametime yesterday, and I hope they got their tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code. I'm going to spell it out for you. LOCKEDONNFL. All one word, Locked On NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. Segment number 2 here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Talking about Arik Armstead and his importance. There's something I didn't mention. He is super, super important to the development of Travon Walker. You know, everybody can say, well, there's Josh right there. That's a good example. Josh is great. I love Josh. The thing about Travon Walker is, and this was brought up by Ryan Nielsen, and Ryan Nielsen does not like comparing players, especially the past players. He just doesn't do it. He told me that. I think he caught on it. I was trying to compare Travon to Cam Hayward. He said, I ain't comparing players from the past. But he did one day say that he believed that Calais Campbell, Arik Armstead could be a big influence on Travon because they're about the same size. Now, Eric's a little bit taller, but the way Travon's yoked up, Travon's arms might be the longest ones on the team. I jokingly told somebody I think he can tie a shoe without bending over. That's how long his arms are. But Travon has a lot more, I believe, characteristics that are very, very similar to Arik Armstead than they are to Josh Allen, even though Travon and Josh are about the same size. Like I said, Travon's a little bit longer and maybe an inch taller. However, with the way that he plays, and he plays primarily, Travon lines up everywhere, but he really lines up on that big inside, and then sometimes he slides into the middle. I just can't wait for the twist action. And what I mean by that is the stunts. When these guys get to playing their games, that's a lot of length with Hines Allen, whether it's Roy Robertson Harris or Mason Smith, who I'm going to get to in just a second, Travon, and as well as Arik Armstead. Let me tell you something. If you're a quarterback and you're on the Jaguar schedule, you better 3-step drop that thing and get it out of there. But even if you do that, those dudes' arms are so long, man, they are going to be a problem for people that have a problem with their release point on that football field. So that's one of the things that I think also benefits this team for having him. Mason Smith is a bit of a wild card because if he develops and he plays extremely well and starts to really, really tap into all of that vast potential that he has as a player. He's a rookie out of LSU, second-round pick, and I expect him to play a lot because, well, guys that are picked in the middle of the second round, that's exactly what they do. They come out and they're ready to go. He played in the Southeastern Conference. He's used to competition. I really, really think that if he is as good as they hope he can be, and he picks it up early, which he seems to have, that's more time that they can spend in the formation that I'm about to name right now. And the reason I thought of this is because I don't worry about who starts. I don't necessarily worry about who finishes the game. I just think at some point, if y'all saw the movie The Five Heartbeats, when they were trying to get their choreography down, and their manager went and got this guy named, they called him Sarge, right? Sarge comes in to teach them choreography. They say they don't need a choreographer. Sarge said, show me your best combination. And they showed it. And Sarge told him, like I thought, that wasn't about nothing. But that ain't what he said, but it's close enough. I want to know who the best combination is. When the game is tough, when the Jacksonville Jaguars get into this scenario, if they happen to go down by 13 for whatever reason, right? and there's 7 minutes to go and they get the ball and they got to go score, stop, score to win. They got to score 14 points, all touchdowns. They got to go score, stop, score, meaning a 4.5-minute drive, right? Or a 4-minute drive with 3 timeouts, kick the ball off with 3 minutes to go, and you got to get them 3 and out. 9 times out of 10, they're going to run it on first down. They're going to run it on second down. You still got the 2-minute warning, and you have your 3 timeouts. When that lineup is necessary, when it's time to win a game, I want to see this at some point this season. Maybe it's not the first week. Maybe it's not the 5th week. But I think by week 8 or week 9, when the Jaguars are really in the thick of things and they're trying to make a push for the division, when it's crunch time, here's the lineup I want to see, and I'm hoping it exists because it has the most potential. Hines Allen, of course, on one side, Trayvon Walker on the other side, Arik Armstead next to Trayvon Walker, and Mason Smith next to Arik Armstead. To me, that from a potential standpoint, from a championship standpoint, from a division winning standpoint, from getting out of the first round standpoint, I really honestly believe that that is the look you want, because what you have is you got 6'4", 6'5", 6'7", 6'5", long arms, big time players, talented players, and it'll kind of rival what the 49ers have done. Shout out to the 49ers, because that's where he came from. And that's the exact example. Hassan Ridgeway doing all of that stuff he does. Arik Armstead, Bosa. And then last year, of course, they had Young and then Randy Gregory, Young, who's down in New Orleans now, former number 1 overall pick out of Ohio State. I really think that becomes a dangerous, dangerous lineup. When the 49ers were behind in Detroit, before Detroit started bouncing the ball off people's head and all of that stuff, when they needed it, they started getting after the quarterback. And that's what I mean about situations, the crunch time situations. When it's time to win the game, when it's time to seal the game, when you're up by 2, okay? If it's 26-24 and the other team has the ball and they got a good kicker and you don't want them in field goal range, but they have to throw because there's not a lot of time, you need to be able to cover with your back 7, and you need to be able to force them to get the ball out of their hands quickly so these guys can keep everything in front of them and come downhill and keep people short of the sticks. So I'm thinking about all of these things, and it really, really makes me happy now that they drafted Mason Smith. And I know a lot of people had trepidation about that draft pick because they wanted something else. The Jaguars ended up getting a corner in the 3rd round that they really like in Jerry and Jones. This is why the signing of Mitch Morse, I believe, was so important. Is because had they not gotten a center in free agency, then they would have had to have gotten one on day 1 or day 2 of the draft. And that means that you wouldn't have been in a position to get one of these guys. So it's another tip of the cap to Trent Baalke for seeing things out in front and not thinking about right now. That's why I always say GMs, especially the ones here in Jacksonville, you can't go to the grocery store hungry, because you're going to buy a whole bunch of stuff that ain't no good for you that you need to consume right now. Because if you go to a grocery store hungry, you're shopping with your stomach and not your brain. I think Trent Baalke actually drafted with his brain. He saw a bigger picture, and he got an idea, and he placed a premium on making sure that they did not get stuck the way that they got stuck last year by not having enough big, girthy people on the defensive line. That's it. I'm going to tell you some more questions that got answered based on who they kept versus who they didn't. We're going to do all of that in the next segment here on Locked On Jaguars. Thank you for coming back here with me on Locked On Jaguars. I ain't say coming back because you ain't went nowhere. You still been there waiting. Thank you for joining me here on segment 3. I got to finish this thought about Arik Armstead, the defensive line, and what it means for the team. I think the Jaguars have done on the defensive line what I have also wanted them to do on the offensive line. And I know you can't do everything in one offseason. And I know y'all sick of me saying this, but I'm going to say it, why it bothers the hell out of me that they didn't do anything last year. And I wish they would have had this attitude that they have this year. I wish they had it last year. Like, I wish they had really, really doubled up maybe on the offensive line, got another dude to grow with Anton Harrison. But that's neither here nor there. We're going to focus on the future, right? But there are some questions that have been answered by this team. Like, why did they draft Mason Smith in the second round instead of getting something else? You see why. This is why. This is exactly why they got him for this reason. And I'm glad they did. They did everything with a purpose. And I'm going to give them an attaboy for it. Other questions that they have answered, that they answered, they really believe in Ronald Darby, don't they? And they really, really do believe in Darnell Savage, don't they? And they really believe in Antonio Johnson. Remember a couple of weeks ago when I was at practice and other people was at practice and they were noticing and he wasn't out there? And at the beginning of practice, it was Dewey Wingard. I'm going to tell you who else was out there at the beginning of practice in the slot. Christian Braswell. He was on the top of the depth chart, and then all of a sudden he ain't here anymore. So the next time they tell you, and the next time Ryan Nielsen comes to you and says, look, this is about competition. We're going to put guys in different spots. Believe them. That wasn't a lie. Me and everybody else who thinks they know this team had Christian Braswell penciled in as the fourth cornerback on this team, or the third corner on this team. We had him penciled in. I did a 53-man roster a couple of weeks, and it was a no-brainer that he was on the team, right? Wrong. We were wrong. And the one thing I can tell you is that is refreshing, because I've said it thousands of times. If we know too much, somebody's not doing their job correctly. If we have all the answers, then somebody's not doing. And how many times in the past did we have all the answers and we were right, and then it turned out it didn't work out, right? We shouldn't have known a lot of things that we've known in the past. Now, I know you guys depend on us for information, and I know you guys depend on us to be the feet on the ground and the ears and then come back and give you the information. But mainly, man, we should be speculating more than anything. We honestly should be speculating more than anything, or trying to use common sense. We shouldn't know, and we didn't know. I just talked about DJ Coleman just the other day about how he was in the Parker Washington, Tank Bigsby, and I also threw in Christian Braswell, how all of these dudes from that draft seem like they're going to make the team. Two of them didn't even make it. It shows you that the Jacksonville Jaguars are serious about competition. They're also serious about their draft choices. DeAndre Prince made this team this year. They really, really do like him. He wasn't a throwaway. They absolutely like DeAndre Prince. All of those questions got answered. Tyler Shatley, fine. I had Tyler Shatley making the team because I said, I thought he should have been gone a couple of years ago, but I had him making the team because, well, Tyler Shatley always made the team here in Jacksonville, right? He didn't make it. They moved on. They realized, you know what? 11 years, we can't, he'll never get better. We moved on. They still obviously believe that Luke Fortner can be salvaged because he's on the team. The other thing is those preseason games and those reps, they absolutely mattered, because I thought Cole Van Lannon, I thought he was out of here after week one and what I saw in training camp. Van Lannon played well in 2 straight games, and then all of a sudden there are some people thinking he should start at one of those guard spots, but he's the backup right tackle to Anton Harrison. If the Jaguars move on next year from both Cam Robinson and Walker Little, the Walker Little part I really expect, it is very, very possible that if they do move on, that Anton Harrison goes to left tackle and Blake Hance steps right in at right tackle. It is absolutely possible. That is something that's extremely plausible because of the way people feel right now about Cole Van Lannon. Did I say Blake Hance or Cole? I meant Cole Van Lannon. That Van Lannon plugs right in. There's also this thought that if he continues to develop, Cooper Hodges can slide right into right guard if the Jaguars decide next year that Brandon Sheriff is kind of at the end of it. And this is what they have to start being. Now, first and foremost, all those guys got to play well. And I am still concerned about the offensive line because you got to be concerned about something. You can't think they're going to go ahead and go 17-0. You got to be concerned about something. I'm still a little bit concerned about the offensive line because now that I understand, I know who they like and I know why they like them, that I can rationalize that. But I also can think for myself, and I can tell you the best that I've ever seen them look was against Atlanta. Atlanta was playing 2s, 3s, and 4s. Atlanta was playing a bunch of people that they waived already. So I'm not naive. Grady Jarrett wasn't out there. Matthew Judon wasn't out there. So, hey, I'm going to, take that with a grain of salt. But like I said, they had two choices. They could have played well or they could have not played well. And they absolutely did play well. So we got to give them at least some sort of modicum of credit for being able to do that. Questions got answered. Tim Jones and his special teams ability, even when you didn't see a lot of him in the preseason and you didn't see a lot of him doing much of anything in training camp, guys like Seth Williams and, of course, 14, Brandon Cooks, my man, Elijah Cooks. We're making all of these plays, and then you saw Braswell. They had all of these dudes running around. Maybe the reason you didn't see a whole bunch of Tim Jones is because they already know what he is and what he has. They knew probably in their mind somebody had to make them cut Tim Jones because he's so valuable as a special teams player. And I know there were some people putting the best special teams players in the league yesterday and saying this is who Jaguar fans and media think Tim Jones is. No, we don't think Tim Jones is that. They think Tim Jones is that. That's why I said they answered that question. Because you didn't see anything. I went to those practices, man. I watched the preseason game. I'm telling you, Tim Jones did not jump out one time at any session that I saw. But guess what? He made the team. And they kept him over Elijah Cooks. There's something to be said about what the room looks like, right? They love their backs. Even though Jalen Jackson at times looked like a bowling ball, just running like a fire hydrant that people couldn't tackle, right? He didn't make the squad. I think they like Tank Bigsby. And I'm going to tell you who showed me something too. I've always liked Dearness Johnson. Dearness Johnson runs with a lot of confidence. And Dearness Johnson has this little look about it, man, that he's spinning in the hole and he's doing a little bit of Alvin Kamara imitation. I really think they love their three running backs. I would not be surprised if in the first half of most games, in the first quarter and a half of most games this year, that all three of those backs touch the ball. I would not be surprised at that, and they're going to keep them fresh. Remember, Doug Peterson had 3 running backs touch the ball in 2017 when they won the Super Bowl. It is absolutely amazing to me how when these teams start cutting down, what happens is a lot of questions that we all had, they really, really do get answered. Something that's going to be answered for me too is this. Who's going to start opposite Foye Oluokun? I'm going to discuss that one tomorrow because I still believe that the Jaguars have a tough decision to make. And I'm going to tell you right now, I think it's going to go in a way that a lot of people are not necessarily going to disagree with, but a lot of people are going to be surprised about the way this thing goes. So look for that tomorrow. We're going to discuss that, and I'll answer your mailbag questions. I appreciate you joining us here on Locked On Jaguars and making us your first listen. Now go listen to Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. You can find the link to Locked On Fantasy Football in the descriptions, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And every day means just that, every single day. Y'all going to hear from me 6 days a week during the football season, Monday through Friday, and then a postcast after the game. And anytime there's any breaking news, we're going to give them that too. A little side note, no waiver claims for the Jaguars. That came out while I was after I started the show. And also something of note, there weren't any former Jags claimed off waivers by anyone else. So while we're talking about competition and we're talking about the fact that all of these good players that they have, if one of these old Jaguars or somebody that was in camp with the Jaguars are going to get claimed, it's going to be a veteran because it definitely wasn't none of the people that got cut. So maybe around the league, they don't feel that the Jaguars really had all of these great players, right? Well, we'll see. If anything changes on that front, we'll make sure to post it on social media and on YouTube. You guys come see me tomorrow. We'll talk about linebackers and do the mailbag. Thanks for joining us once again. Take care of each other. We'll see you next time.